This is SANFEng and GINO, and we are doing our quarterly update video for spring 2018 for collective narrative. So in this video, first of all, we're going to go over our sprint plans from 0 to 5, and then we're going to continue on with a demo of our collective narrative programming language, a demo of the compiler that we wrote, as well as a demo of the narrative that we wrote that performs on the collective experiences platform. So we're going to start off with sprint 0, in which we were mostly continuing an idea from last quarter about a narrative structure called running as art. We struggled a lot with this because we weren't exactly sure how to structure the story of this, and we went to office hours, which proved very helpful because we were able to gain a much better understanding of how you could structure narratives through code. So for sprint 1, we decided to familiarize ourselves with the CE API because it was going to be the one that we were building on. So we wrote several examples of simple narratives using the code base, and we identified things that were easy to do with the C API and things that were hard to do, because those were the tasks that our collective narratives API would have to do. For sprint 2, we focused more on the design side, in which we try to find several examples of narratives to encompass a wide variety. And we got some good feedback during this about how some of our examples were very similar, and we needed to come up with a wider range of examples. So we searched for things like traditional narratives, branching narratives, self-directing narratives to try to get a as wide-encompassing a group of examples as possible. Sprint 3 was when we focused on writing our programming language, and in this case, the examples proved very helpful because we had to make sure that every single one of our examples could be written within the programming language, and that was our effort from Sprint 2 coming to fruition. Sprint 4 consisted of writing the actual compiler that would help turn the CN code into the CE code. And we received a lot of help from the collective experiences team on this project, and we're very grateful for that help. Sprint 5 was when we actually wrote an example of a narrative using the CN API and watching it compile down to the CE level and having it run. So that was the gist of our sprint plans.
Second part of this video, we want to talk about our demo of its collective narrative programming language. And so this UML diagram is some of the structure of this platform we are thinking of initially. So basically, we are combining the technical details of the CE platform as well as the thing we learned from different narrative structures. The research we did on like branches and stuff like that. So this actually maps directly into this programming language of the collective narrative we are creating. So basically, this is what we call like a very object-oriented way to write the narrative. So basically, we have the definition for setting, which basically is the context of a situation, and chapter, it's the overarching abstraction to hold characters and objects, and of course, characters for experienced participants to be mapped onto using the static affordances, and a set of action, which will change the direction of the story and how the story develops, a set of objects, as well as a set of helper functions to just make this all connected together. So we also have an example of a Harry Potter story written in this language. First of all, we are defining a bunch of variables such as a common room, a bedroom, and those are like the settings for us to leverage our static affordances onto. And we have a set of characters, Harry, Ron, Hermione, and we have 3 different chapters. And this, in the way it's constructed, we have to write different actions for a different character in different chapter in a way that those actions actually helps the character to do something. We try to mimic this like interaction between different characters by defining a set of actions, and the set of action is what actually develops the story. So think of action as something that changes owner of an object, changes a context of a character or a context of a chapter. So the next time the next part of the chapter develops, everything will be refreshed and will be updated according to whenever the last character did. So this is like how the action comes about. And lastly, we are like pushing all the actions onto the characters and also the chapters. So running this once, we should be able to produce one like a huge chapter object, and this chapter object should hold everything we were talking about we can use to develop the narrative. And this is what we're going to use for the next part. Basically, we want to convert this chapter objects into fit into our compiler, and we should be able to spit out like a CE definition of experience.
The third part of our video, we're going to be going over the compiler that we wrote, which converts the chapter object from the collective narrative API to an experience OCE down to the CE level. So without going too much into specifics, essentially this takes a lot of things that are defined narratively, such as setting, and turns them into things that can be used by the C APIs. For example, a setting has multiple detectors, and this is what allows the platform to recognize when a story can happen, as well as which characters can participate in the story based on the attributes that they have within the story. In addition, the idea of recurring actions as well as continuity is done through callbacks, because when a character completes an action, they will trigger a callback, and then the remaining options are based upon the repercussions of that action.
Okay, so for the last part of the video, we will just talk about how the current state of the app is and how it's running on the server. And basically, what we did is we created a compiler that compiles the first chapter of Harry Potter story to C structure, the collective experience, and then we created a template for our story. And currently, we can run the story on the local host, as well as run the story on the Heroku app. We deploy using a free account, which has a 30-day free trial, but it's all right. So just to demo how the app should work, basically, if you're logging as Garrett because that's one of the users we already set up the location to be perfect. And then when we log in as Garrett, we'll receive a Harry Potter story experience invite. And then when you click to participate, here you are reprising the role as Hermione because we set up the static affordances of Garrett to be the same as the Hermione in the chapter. So if you can recall, like the character has a certain context, that context is the static affordances we use to match the user with the story character. And then we have a list of action as we discussed in the structure of the narrative, and this is basically as a main to progress the story. The first chapter, Hermione is the first person who take an action. That's why there's only one kind of option here. But as a story progresses on, but the potentially if the next character is Harry should be able to have multiple actions that will lead the story to branch out, basically to become a little bit different for every single choice of action. And then we can have any kind of user interaction. To be honest, we can ask the user to upload some text. We can ask the user to upload a picture, upload a photo, and just anything that we can add, we can make a template for it, and then we can show up in the UI. And basically, the current work, what we have been doing this week is we debugged a lot about the callbacks. We dig into the details about how the architecture works to grab a submission, how the submission is being fast and configured to call back to our callback function. But we're still working on that. It's gonna take probably like 1 week or so because we are very, very close, we believe. And the only reason that's preventing this from happening is because the setup of the C experience is a little bit different from the other stories, like the story time. And we believe that when we're debugging it, we find out some like pre-existing bugs in the system, and then we are getting very close every single time. So I think currently when we do submit, say yeah, works awesome. When we do that, it will show us the resulting page of this template instead of like a callback page. So because the page is showing up, so that's good. So we need to just figure out what is a callback. I think for this quarter, both of us learned a lot in terms of how to use technology to develop an idea and how to like link the tech part to the design part, as well as most of the conceptual thinking about narrative structure. And it was great. It was great. Like we worked very hard to get a compiler to work. It's exciting to see this thing actually showed up in the UI and everything is like working as per normal. And yeah, so that's for collective narrative. Thanks for watching.